Hey, how's it going? My name is Ashley Rose. As you know, you can call me Ash. Is this thing on? It's on. Hello, it's Fred. Of course it's on. Anyways, disregard that. Anyways, welcome back to the channel. Once again, if you're new here, hi, my name is Ashley Rose, and of course, you can call me Ash. And make sure you like, share, subscribe to Death Hearts 13. That is my channel where we do, of course, interviews, and we have this podcast. We also do lyric videos, and you get to meet some new artists that you probably never heard of before. Anyways, of course, you can go to deatharts13.com to support us, support the channel. We have two shops there. We got Amazon, and of course, we have our own merch store. Now, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get into, if you clicked onto this title, we're going to talk about The Cure today. This episode was written by Jameis Mooney. Now, before playlists and algorithms determined what your next favorite track is, like on Spotify, or your radio DJ just had one mission at the time, which was to, of course, find the next big hit. Before it blew up, as the 80s dawned and MTV opened more doors to more oops, I'm sorry. Jesus, I can't talk today.
What's going on, y'all? This is Jacob with Secret Society of Goths, and I've spent the past half decade making content for bands from all over the world to help them grow their audiences organically. I never use AI and I never use bots, so if you're an artist trying to grow your audience, hit me up. Send me one message on Instagram and we will get a plan going for you.
As the 80s dawned and MTV opened its doors to more experimental visuals and creativity, something strange happened, something artsy, something moody, something that began to dominate American screens and sound waves. Def Leppard lit it up with glam metal.
This episode is powered by Curse Cosmetics. Use my code AROSEDistortion for 10% off, where horror meets beauty. And also go to Abracadabra NYC, where horror is year-round. The year-round Halloween store, that's Abracadabra NYC. Same code for 10% off, AROSEDistortion.
On the scene, Depeche Mode enchanted new audiences. Sound-wise, Iron Maiden shredded through metalheads' minds, but some listeners wanted something darker, something deeper. This would enter goth rock. Now there are a lot of, well, not necessarily is, there are a lot of opinions whether or not The Cure is considered goth rock, new wave, 80s, post-punk. I always had a simple answer that The Cure is all those things, depending on what genre, what year you listen to The Cure. Now, goth didn't appear overnight. It simmered beneath the surface in New York with the Dolls, Patti Smith, in Australia, the Saints, and in Manchester, of course, with Joy Division, which is a popular band, which we'll get to talking to Joy Division on another time. Different day. Joy Division has such a great history, and I can't wait until we actually start to begin to talk about them and the Smiths as well. Meanwhile, just outside Brighton, a few teenagers were rehearsing under the name Malice. I believe it's Malice. If I'm mispronouncing that, I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was. It was inspired by the theatrical grit of Alice Harvey and the shape-shifting spectacle of who we know as David Bowie. David Bowie influenced a lot of people in goth rock and in individuality. He spawned, creativity. He spawned a lot of things. And of course, we will talk about David Bowie once we get into our later episodes. We do have a full episode planned specifically about David Bowie. And of course, as you know, he did eventually team up with Trent Reznor. Now, they were trying to start a movement, and they just wanted to make something real. One of these teenagers was Robert Smith of The Cure. Smith once told Rolling Stone, the gothiest thing about The Cure was how often he went to the Batcave with Steve. That's not just a clever quote. The Batcave, a club tucked in Soho, London, was the breeding ground for goth culture, and whether they claimed the title or not, The Cure became one of the most influential bands and forces in the scene. And of course, we will talk about the Batcave eventually at some point. Tolhurst, the original drummer and later keyboardist for The Cure, had a different take. He had a different take. He was firm in his beliefs. The Cure is a goth band. In his 2023 book, Goth, A History, it pinpoints Goth, A History. It pinpoints the moments that it all crystallized for him. He was 18, tuning through the radio static when news broke Elvis Presley was dead. To him, it wasn't just the end of a man. It was the end of a generation of aesthetics, ideals, in a sense. Elvis had ruled post-war Britain's immigration, and in the movement, Tolhurst understood something else had to rise, and that something would begin, and that would evolve into The Cure. Now, him and Smith and Michael Dempsey became The Cure. They leaned into a psychedelic and punk sound. I found that a lot of bands, especially particular ones that I know that would eventually lead into goth rock, and horror punk, they eventually started with a psychedelic type sound, something experimental. Usually it's around the lines of like the Doors. They would eventually evolve and modernize to the current time period, and those bands would end up becoming goth rock, death rock, and then horror punk. So it's kind of all together in a weird way. It's like a full circle, I think. The only thing they agreed on was how much they didn't want to be like anyone else. And that's a lot of cases for these bands. Their third single, Jumping Someone Else's Train, was a manifesto against trend hopping, against joining any bandwagon, goth included, believe it or not. Still, the early albums, Faith and Pornography, would become the blueprints for goth rock. Not for the look, but just for the spirit and of course the sound. Now, goth was never just about eyeliner and fog machines. It was about exploring melancholy, macabre fascinations, horror obsessions, the beauty in sadness. Now, goth, I've always believed it is a music-based subculture. A lot of people would disagree with that, but a lot of people would agree with that. Tolhurst put it in best, let me rephrase that. He actually quoted, Tolhurst put it best, we didn't know what goth was. It hadn't become anything yet. From horror movies, goth isn't a style, it's an energy, a lens through which to understand grief, decay, and yes, beauty. The beauty in all things that were dark and macabre. Their debut album, Three Imaginary Boys, was well received. Critics praised its minimalist and raw emotion, but Robert Smith actually hated it. He didn't like the track order. He didn't like the album art. He especially did not like. He didn't like the track order. He didn't like the album art. He especially didn't like Chris Perry from Polydor. Had decided all of it without the band. So that's more or less what happened there. Smith made a choice. The next album would be in his hands, and he would have more of an input or say. And that album was 17 Seconds, the true beginning of the Cure's goth and gothic sonic identity. Tolhurst was channeling Bowie's Low, feeling isolated but inspired. Smith had just toured with Susie and the Banshees, who that's actually what our next episode is going to be about, is Susie and the Banshees. So tune in for that. It's a great write. I'm sorry. Tune in for that. I was going to say great read. Oh my God. Tune in for that. It's very well researched. I think our research team did very well in the aspect when it came to Susie and the Banshees. It's going to cover part of Susie Sue's career, and then, of course, what would become of Susie and the Banshees. So anyways, back to what we're saying. He toured with Susie and the Banshees, and it expanded his worldview and started sharpening his songwriting. Simon would eventually replace Dempsey on bass. A result would be a tightrope between an ambient sound, sorrow, and a punk energy, or like a post-punk energy. It was recorded on a very shoestring budget. It was recorded in just a week with tape shortages and 18-hour days. So that's how we ended up with that album. So you can only imagine, let's say like there's 24 hours in a day, so 18 of them was the majority of them working and recording this album. Now each Cure album brought a different kind of darkness. Faith added experiments. Some songs dropped the guitar entirely. Pornography was the collapse of a drug-fueled, haunted type sound. Then Japanese whispers brought into a new wave element till her switch to keyboards, and Gallup briefly left. And the Cure found themselves on the edge of they found themselves becoming mainstream at that point. They were on the edge of becoming mainstream, but Goth, it wasn't over yet when it came to the Cure. Even in their pop phase, the Cure stayed the Cure the best they can. They stayed weird. They stayed inspirational. They started writing lyrics more in a poetic manner. For instance, through the force that through the green fuse drives the flower, life and death, the creation and decay, one and the same. Meanwhile, Smith drew from other inspirations in the song How Beautiful You Are, and it's based on Eyes of the Poor. Proof that even in the radio-friendly hits, the band stayed rooted into Gothic literature, and of course that inspiration. Now, as the title is called, Disintegration of the Cure is still touring. They're still creating to this day. Now we're on to the album that would become Disintegration, a return to darkness, a return to goth. This was their most successful record. It was featuring the hit Love Song, which is personally one of my favorites, and it marked the final album with Solhurst. Years later, the final goth record, Blood Flowers, arrived. No singles, just a whisper campaign from Robert Smith pushing back against the label that never quite understood what the Cure was about or who the Cure were. It was raw, it was polarizing, and it was deeply personal at this point. So, is the Cure a goth band? Robert Smith says no. Solhurst says yes. Whether you wear the label or run from it, the truth remains the Cure created 3 of the most influential goth albums in history. More than that, they gave listeners permission to be strange, but most of all, to be seen and be themselves. And that is the most goth thing of all. Now, thank you for joining me again for this week's show. I'm here for you every week. I'm here for you every week. Thank you for joining me. And if you like today's episode, share it with your fellow outsiders. Leave us, of course, a comment. I love reading your comments. Whether you listen to our podcast, whether you check out my interviews, whether if you like viewing our shorts, our lyric videos, check it out. We look forward to hearing from you. And once again, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for future episodes. Until next time, we'll see you again. Goodbye and good night.
All right, it's time for my favorite part, the credits. Writers, Ash, that's me, your host, Jameis Mooney. All research is done by the Death Arts 13 research team. That includes me sometimes, Ash, and also Jameis does the research as well. Executive producer, that's me, Ashley Rose, your host. And special thanks to Curse Cosmetics, Abracadabra NYC, 8-Bit Magnet Co., Rep Sports, Raise Energy, Club Early Bird, Canva, because I feel like no one thinks Canva, and Secret Society of Goths, telling secrets for over 7 years. This has been a DeathArts13.com production. So give us a follow at DeathArts13.com.